Abortion remains legal in Iowa up to 20 weeks of pregnancy. The Iowa Supreme Court earlier today released its ruling on legal procedures involving Governor Kim Reynolds' so-called fetal heartbeat bill. The ban would have stopped abortions once cardiac activity is detected, usually around 6 weeks. Health experts say that's before most women know they're pregnant. The justices essentially upheld a lower court ruling blocking that ban because they split 3-3. One justice recused herself. We have team coverage tonight on this ruling. Local 5's Larissa Leone joins us as pro-life and abortion rights advocates are responding. Dana Oxley will share what could happen next as she speaks with legislators. But first, Local 5's Mary Sugden joins us from outside the Iowa Supreme Court building with what this ruling means. We go first out to Mary at the Iowa Supreme Court. And Mary, the justices were at odds on this case. So why did they disagree, and did they find any common ground?
Yes, Stephanie, if you read through these documents, you can really feel the energy and, quite frankly, the heated arguments that justices get into throughout this. And really what this boils down to is the standard that justices would use to decide this case. Really think of that as there being two lenses. Now, the first is undue burden. And what that means is that a law can't create an undue burden on your fundamental rights. The other is rational basis, which means the law should stay in place if there's a rational basis to believe legislators thought it would serve legitimate state interests. Now, it is important to note that that last one, rational basis, that is what the U.S. Supreme Court used when it overturned Roe v. Wade last summer. But here in Iowa, justices couldn't see eye to eye on the standard they should use in this case, and that is what created this stalemate.
He's saying it wasn't properly an appeal.
Legal expert Sally Frank says the justices who agree with the lower court's decision to keep an injunction in place say Governor Reynolds' lawyers went about this case in an unprecedented way. First, they didn't appeal the injunction when it happened 4 years ago.
And Waterman is essentially saying we are not the legislature. If you want a different law, pass a different law. If you want a constitutional amendment, pass the constitutional amendment. But don't ask us to reopen an injunction.
Frank says since the deadline passed for the 4-year-old injunction to be appealed, the governor's only avenue would be a petition to review the lower court's decision to see if the judge acted illegally or outside jurisdiction. In his writings, Justice Thomas Waterman states not only would he deny that petition, but even if it was granted, would annul it, since the lower court judge used the undue burden test in their ruling.
Remember last year they were split 4-3 on the question of what the review test was.
Frank says last summer, justices essentially found no one had asked them to review specifically whether undue burden or rational basis would be the standard for abortion cases. Therefore, undue burden remained the standard. Justice Matthew McDermott, however, strongly disagrees. Writing, since Iowa has ruled there is no fundamental right to abortion, the undue burden test doesn't hold up. And Iowa justices should follow in the footsteps of their federal colleagues who used rational basis in their overturn of Roe v. Wade. Waterman and Frank disagree.
A state can grant more rights than the federal government does. So Iowa can differ from the federal government. Iowa has in many cases said we're giving more rights than the federal Constitution does. And they said because nobody asked us to overturn that earlier case, that ruling stands and the standard in Iowa is undue burden.
And in Waterman's opinion, he also states that this isn't normal for justices to release an opinion following a split like this. But Frank believes that the justices on the other side may have done this because this is such a controversial and hot-button issue for Iowans that they would really want that information and to know more than just that the justices were split and that this affirms the lower court's decision. Live outside the Iowa Supreme Court, Mary Sugden, Local 5 News. Stephanie, back to you in the studio.
Mary, thank you. You may wonder how the U.S. Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade impacts Iowa's abortion ruling. The justices don't agree on that either. 3 of them believe the case used to overturn Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs case, has no bearing on Iowa's constitution, while the other 3 believe the U.S. Supreme Court's decision should be a guide for states. Several Iowa politicians are weighing in following the Iowa Supreme Court ruling, most notably Governor Kim Reynolds, who first proposed the bill in 2018. The governor is saying without an affirmative decision, there is no justice for the unborn. Reynolds also saying that they are reviewing their options and continuing to fight for the bill. Representative Pat Grassley agreeing with the governor, saying in part, quote, going forward, we will be working together to pass legislation that will protect life, support new mothers, and promote strong families in Iowa. On the other side of the aisle, others celebrating today's ruling. House Democratic leader Jennifer Converst saying, in part, quote, "It's simple, people over politics. Politicians and judges have no place interfering in someone else's decision about when to start a family." We have heard from some of our political leaders. Advocates in the state also having mixed reactions tonight, some celebrating, others concerned. Local 5's Larissa Leone joins us with what we are hearing from people who are invested in this issue. Larissa.
Yeah, Stephanie, that's exactly right. I'm here today at the Des Moines Beer Garden where a solidarity kind of meeting is happening. It's kicking off right behind me. Let me show you right now. So Interfaith Alliance and Planned Parenthood Advocates of Iowa have created a space for those in favor of today's Supreme Court ruling to celebrate and process the decision's impact on Iowans. Now, we spoke to advocates on both sides of the aisle, and here's what they had to say about today's ruling.
We've been waiting a long time for this bill that was already enacted law to be enforced. And so we're really disappointed at the ruling today, to say the least.
Many Iowans were depending on the outcome of this case today. And we are celebrating the preservation of our freedom, health, and safety.
It's not quite a packed house yet out here, but definitely some people still trickling in. Tonight at 10, we'll have more from our political leaders, and we'll also hear more from these advocates that you just heard from in live. And I'll toss it back to you, Stephanie.
All right, Larissa, thank you. So here are the 3 things to know right now. The current abortion law remains the same. Now, over the last 14 years, there have only been 18 cases where the court was split, meaning there was no opinion. The life amendment is still alive in the Iowa legislature. This amendment would guarantee the right to life in Iowa's state constitution and further criminalize abortion. And finally, Governor Reynolds says she will continue to fight for the 6-week ban. After today's ruling, you may have questions or comments on what this means for reproductive rights here in the state. So text us to the number that you see right there on your screen. We will be talking with legal experts later today to get you some answers.